Hi folks, Rich here. Hope you're all doing very well today. So recently on a Zoom conference, somebody asked me the question about using Kontakt and multiple outputs in Studio One, and it's popped up from time to time where I've recorded a short video to show how we go about it, but I thought this video would be useful to explain the two different ways we can do it and what are the advantages and disadvantages. There are more advantages than disadvantages, of course, but let's load in Kontakt first of all and have a look at my default configuration. So I currently have 16 stereo outputs. There is another way of doing this, of course. If we were to take a library with multiple sections, such as symphonic strings by Spitfire, we can load those into Kontakt and set up the outputs for each of them. We do this quite quickly by going to the bottom here where we can see the outputs, and we can set presets or batch configuration. We'll select that drop down and then we'll go to batch functions, and then we'll see the option here that says clear output section and create one individual channel for each instrument. When we do that, it's going to send all of the instrument libraries that we have loaded into Kontakt and assign it its own output. What we need to do to get this to the outside world is select this icon at the top and select 5 of those, as we have 5 libraries. In the Arranger window, we can see that we have the instance of Kontakt and it has its own channel. What we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to press Control or Command and then start dragging down. And that's going to create 5 instances, which enables us to route our 5 outputs to each of these instances. Starting at the top, we can see that we have in the inspector, and we get to that by pressing F4 or the I. We've got out, in and channel. All we need to be changing here is something in the output and something in the channel. For the first instrument, we can see the instrument channel set to 1. The channel here is also set to 1. And you can see this represented here is the same as it is in here. And likewise within Kontakt. So I'll use the down arrow key to navigate quickly. And I'll switch the second one to all 2s, 3s, 4s, and finally set the outputs to 5 and the channel to 5 as well. And this now gives us control over each of those instrument libraries independently. Fantastic, which means I can also play them as an ensemble. Fantastic. So with that in mind, that's a very quick way of dealing with it. The great thing about this is it means that if you've already got in mind the idea to use the first, second violins, cello and basses with their own independent channels, this is a very quick way of dealing with it. So you might be asking yourself, well, why would I have it set up as default 16 outputs? Well, I have this set up because if, say for example, I'm blending instruments and I change my mind about something, maybe I bring in the violins here and I'd like to pair them with the Albion Neo strings, I could load those in. I could take something from the London Contemporary Orchestra strings, maybe blend those violins in as well. By doing it this way, it means that I can quickly interchange between libraries. I'll sort of demonstrate that here. So this string's A, I need to set to channel 2, and the violins here to 3. I'll do the same as I did before here, and I'll create 3 tracks. All set to 1 on the first, all set to 2 on the second. There we go. And all set to 3 on the third. So I've done this. Now, maybe at this stage I'm happy with the blend of these libraries together. What if I want to change that, like we said? Well, let's take something like woodwinds, for example. I'm going to replace the violins here with some woodwinds. So I'll drag that over the top of the instrument. Because we're replacing it, the output has stayed as stereo 3 here. And that means that I can quickly swap and change between libraries to work out what's going to work well in a composition. It also means as well that I don't need to worry too much about how the batch configuration was set up. If I'm in this one, where I've set it up using the presets of batch configuration and the clear output section to create new channels for each loaded instrument, and I decide to replace something. Let's say, for example, I'd like to swap out the violas and have another violin section. I'll load that into there, and what becomes then, a little bit problematic, I suppose, is that my violins 1 is now labelled on the output as violas, and this could get confusing. So, although the first way is quicker, sometimes it can be useful to at least have the default output set to 16 outputs so that you've got the flexibility. The fact that we have 16 outputs does also mean that we can still use the batch functions and add a channel for each instrument. So by having 16 outputs, we're maximising the capabilities of Kontakt, but we still have that flexibility. We'll do the same thing as we did before, and we'll take a cello section here and we'll replace the woodwinds. We'll do the same in the other instrument where we'd set it up via the presets and batch configuration. Let's swap out that second lot of violins that we've added in there and replace that with cello. And of course that output is always going to be labelled as violas at this stage. What we could then do is we go to the presets, batch functions, and then we could rename everything there. And of course that cello section that we've just added has now been relabeled as for the output as cello. It's an extra few steps, whatever works for you, I suppose, at the end of the day, but that's the two ways that you can deal with it. What we'd like to do here sometimes is obviously colour our sections so that we can see which one's which, go into the mixer, and of course if we want to label things we can do that in the arranger window or in the mixer, and of course that will be represented in the mixer. So I hope in some way that helps you a little bit. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. The final thought I'd probably leave here is in relation to performance. When we load in Kontakt and we have multiple libraries within the same instance of Kontakt, we're using only one instance of Kontakt, which of course will help with CPU usage. The other side of it as well is that if we use multiple libraries that contain the same samples, because they're loaded into RAM, we can actually add in multiple versions of the same library without eating up that extra RAM. Here's an example. Let's load the violins 1 in, and we can see that it uses 393 megabytes. We'll minimize that, and then we'll add in another one, and another one, and another one. And you can literally just keep on going forever and ever and ever. And the amount of RAM that we used or utilized is 393 megabytes of RAM because it's loading those samples in. If you're experiencing problems with large libraries where the amount of memory here far surpasses your needs, then what you can do is you can purge all samples. And you can do that for all of the instruments. When you purge all the samples, nothing's loaded into RAM. But if a key is played, we can see that it loads in as we play it. And it's worthwhile that if you're using lots of libraries and you need to utilize this function, allow the song to play through a few times so that it can call in all the round robins. So if I was just to press that key G, then I would only be using 244 megabytes of RAM. Likewise for any of the other versions of that. Now it's not likely that you would use 4 lots of violins from the same section. But if you were loading in a synth, for example, that contains lots of presets, using it this way could be extremely useful. Anyway, that's just a final thought. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon.